Okay, so let's talk about something I think, well, a lot of us might feel sometimes if you ever felt it. That really frustrating sense that things you used to absolutely love, maybe hobbies or seeing friends or even just, small things, they all feel a bit flat.
Yeah, that feeling.
That nagging feeling, like your motivation is just packed up and left, your enthusiasm's gone dim, and actual genuine joy feels, I don't know, kind of out of reach.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, like a lot of people, you've even thought, am I just being lazy?
Right. And that's such a common and honestly quite isolating experience, isn't it? But a really, really critical point our source material makes right from the get-go is this. You are not lazy.
That's such a relief to hear, actually. And it feels like a
Yeah.
really important reframing. That's where we want to start this deep dive today.
Mm-hmm.
Because this thing we're describing, it isn't some kind of personal failing, is it?
No, not at all. It's actually a recognized neurological state. Now, our source does initially mention a term, anhedonia, sort of as something to keep an eye on.
Right.
But it quickly clarifies that the proper scientific term we're going to be digging into is anhedonia.
Anhedonia. Cool.
And what's really interesting, I think, is how the material straight away tries to reassure you. Like, look, this isn't about your character. It's not a flaw. It's a very specific state your brain can get into.
And often as a way to protect itself, apparently.
Exactly. Often as a kind of protective measure, even if it doesn't feel very protective at the time.
So our mission today, then, is to really unpack what this anhedonia thing actually is. Look at where it comes from in the brain, the surprising origins, maybe.
Yeah.
And crucially, dig into some scientifically proven methods that are detailed in our sources.
Yeah.
Methods to help, reset the system and hopefully get back that sense of joy and motivation.
It really can feel like the pleasure center of your brain is just sort of checked out.
Yeah.
And our sources are clear. This isn't just being tired or, bored because you're overworked. It runs deeper, it's more systemic, and it needs a specific kind of approach to fix.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics then. Because the sources really do break down how chronic stress, that relentless pressure so many people feel, how that actually messes with the reward and pleasure system right there in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't just a feeling, it's physiology changing.
Exactly. And what's really insightful is the specific mechanism they describe. The material explains that chronic stress keeps activating the HPA axis. That's your hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Right, the body's main stress response system.
Precisely. Now, it's vital for, survival if a lion jumps out at you.
Sure, acute threats.
But when it's activated chronically, day in, day out, as we learn, it just floods your system with cortisol, that classic stress hormone.
Okay, and here's the bit from the source that really connected it for me.
Yeah.
That constant cortisol flood then makes dopamine the actual neurochemical that gives you pleasure, motivation, that wanting feeling it makes it work less effectively in your brain circuit.
Yeah, it dampens the signal.
So your brain basically gets stuck in this hyper-alert threat detection mode and pleasure just. Well, it fades into the background.
And if you connect that dot, right, when those crucial dopamine pathways get weak or dull, motivation just evaporates.
Makes sense.
The sources paint a pretty stark picture here. You don't want anything, you don't do anything, and you don't care what happens. And it repeats, this isn't because you're lazy, it's because your brain chemistry has literally shifted.
That condition, that's anhedonia.
That precisely is anhedonia.
And it sounds like it's way more common than maybe we think. Our sources even talk about two different types, right?
That's right. There's consummatory anhedonia. That's where maybe you do the thing, you go through the motions, but you just don't feel any pleasure or joy from it.
Okay, like eating your favorite food, but it tasting like cardboard.
Sort of, yeah. Or watching a movie you used to love and feeling nothing. And then there's anticipatory anhedonia, which arguably is even tougher.
Why is that?
Because that's when you lack the motivation or even the desire to start doing anything in the first place. The wanting is gone before you even begin.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds incredibly difficult.
And most people who are struggling with, chronic stress, mental fatigue, they often have a bit of both going on.
Right.
And the sources warn, if anhedonia isn't addressed, it can spiral. It can lead to emotional numbness, feeling really isolated, constant fatigue, and just this deep sense of meaninglessness or emptiness.
Okay, but here's that powerful reframe again that the sources offer. This isn't a personality problem. It's actually your brain shutting itself down to protect you and stop you from getting hurt. That really changes how you think about it, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It takes this thing that feels purely negative and frames it as a kind of protective mechanism, even if it's maybe misguided or overactive in the long run.
Right.
But the really, really good news, and our sources really hammer this home, is that the system can be reset. You can get that sense of joy and motivation back.
And importantly, it's not about just gritting your teeth and forcing yourself to get over it. The sources are quite clear. That just doesn't work.
No, that white-knuckling approach tends to fail here. The truth is you actually have to retrain your nervous system.
So it's not just mindset, not just thinking positive thoughts.
It's applied neuroscience, really, which sounds complicated, but the methods are actually quite practical.
Okay, let's hear them. What are these scientifically proven ways to actually do that retraining?
All right, so the first method the material goes into detail on is dopamine decompression.
Dopamine decompression.
Yeah, and this is basically about intentionally cutting back on those really intense, sudden dopamine spikes that our modern lives just constantly throw at our brains.
Okay. So things like, what, constantly scrolling social media feeds or maybe too much caffeine, loads of sugar, those quick, intense hits.
Exactly those things. You dial those back. And instead, our sources suggest engaging in simple, focused activities. Maybe taking a deliberate walk without your phone buzzing, or doing some deep work without constant interruptions.
And the science behind that is?
The idea is it makes your brain more sensitive to dopamine again. When it's not constantly flooded by huge spikes, it starts to appreciate the smaller, more natural rewards. It lets that feeling of pleasure and motivation actually register again. It's like hitting a reset button for your reward system.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Kind of letting the baseline reset. Okay, powerful first step. What's the second approach our sources talk about for shifting the brain chemistry?
Number 2 is vagus nerve activation. This is all about physically signaling to your body that it's safe, helping it shift out of that chronic stress mode.
The vagus nerve.
Right.
Right, that's the big one, connecting the brain and body.
That's the one. It's a key pathway for telling your brain, hey, you can relax now.
So how do we activate it, practically speaking? The sources mention some simple things.
Yeah, really simple things, actually, like cold contact, splashing cold water on your face, or even a quick blast of cold in the shower.
Mm-hmm. Bird.
Yeah. Also, deep, slow breathing. Specifically, diaphragmatic breathing, aiming for maybe 6 breaths a minute.
Yeah.
And even things like humming or singing or gargling water.
Humming.
Yeah. These actions directly stimulate the vagus nerve. And that stimulation basically sends a signal upstairs telling your body to switch from that fight or flight sympathetic mode
Into the rest and digest, or maybe rest and receive rewards, parasympathetic mode.
Exactly. It's a direct physiological lever you can pull to change your state.
I like how tangible these are. Okay, cold water, breathing, humming. Got it. What's the third strategy for getting that joy back?
The third one is behavioral activation, often shortened to BA. And our sources point out this is actually one of the most effective treatments out there for depression.
Okay, behavioral activation. What's the core idea?
It's simple, but really powerful. Basically, you schedule small, manageable tasks, things that you used to enjoy or that align with your values, even if the thought of doing them right now feels completely unappealing, like zero motivation.
Okay, but that sounds like the classic catch-22, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If you have zero motivation, how do you even start scheduling and doing these tasks? That feels like the biggest hurdle.
It is a hurdle, and our sources address this directly. They say, and this is crucial, remember, first you have to do the work, then the feeling and motivation will follow, not the other way around.
So action first, feeling second.
Exactly. It's about breaking that cycle of inertia by initiating action, however small, rather than waiting for motivation to just magically show up. Because with anhedonia, it often won't. You start small, maybe ridiculously small, and the very act of doing starts to rebuild those reward circuits.
Okay, that's counterintuitive to how we usually think. I'll do it when I feel like it's right. But it makes perfect sense if you're retraining a system.
Right.
What's number 4?
Fourth method is frictionless goal structuring, and this often uses a specific technique known as WOOP.
WOOP, like W-O-O-P.
Yep, W-O-O-P. It stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, Plan. It's about setting very specific, small goals with really precise timelines.
Okay, wish what you want. Outcome the result. Obstacle.
Obstacle, what might get in your way, internally or externally, and this is key. You have to anticipate the challenges, especially the emotional ones, like feeling overwhelmed or just not wanting to.
Right. And then plan.
Plan is where, for each obstacle you identified, you create a specific if-then plan. If obstacle happens, then I will do action to overcome it.
Like pre-programming the solution.
Exactly. And according to the material, this whole WOP process actually activates the brain's reward pathway, specifically involving the prefrontal cortex and the striatum, and it effectively multiplies your motivation just by planning it out this way. It makes success feel more inevitable because you've already mentally rehearsed overcoming the bumps.
Making success frictionless. I like that. Okay, wish, outcome, obstacle, plan. Got it. And the fifth and final way the sources suggest.
The fifth is structured mental restructuring. This pulls from proven cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, techniques.
Okay, CBT. How does that work in this context?
The process involves actively noticing and writing down your recurring negative thoughts, the ones that often fuel that anhedonic state. Then you identify the specific type of thinking error or cognitive distortion they represent, like is it catastrophizing, all or nothing thinking?
Right, labeling the unhelpful thought pattern.
Exactly. And then the crucial step, you deliberately reframe that thought, you challenge it and replace it with a more logical, balanced, and positive perspective that's actually grounded in real evidence, not just wishful thinking.
So it's about consciously challenging those automatic negative internal narratives that can keep us feeling stuck and, well, joyless.
That's precisely it. Doing this consistently allows the more logical, executive part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to gain more influence over your emotional responses. And the result, as our sources describe it, is not only greater emotional stability, but also a renewed sense of reward and motivation creeping back in.
Okay, so let's recap this a bit. What this deep dive has really shown us, based on our sources, is that anhedonia, this loss of joy and motivation, it isn't you being lazy or flawed. It's a very real brain chemistry issue.
Yeah, fundamentally, it's often about our reward and pleasure systems getting disrupted, frequently triggered by chronic stress.
And this is the really hopeful part. The system can be reset. It's not permanent.
Absolutely. And it's not just about thinking happy thoughts. It's about actively retraining your nervous system using these neuroscience-backed techniques.
Right, these 5 things. Dopamine decompression.
Vagus nerve activation.
Behavioral activation, doing first, feeling later.
Frictionless goal structuring, that WOP method.
And structured mental restructuring, tackling those negative thoughts. These offer real, tangible, science-based ways to start feeling better and reconnecting with joy.
They really do provide a pathway back.
You know, what keeps sticking with me from all this is that core idea from the sources. This isn't a personality problem. It's actually your brain shutting itself down to protect you and stop you from getting hurt.
That protective angle.
Yeah. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does it really mean for us when the very mechanisms designed to protect us can sometimes inadvertently lead us away from joy? And I guess, what insights does that give us about this incredibly intricate dance between our conscious mental state and our brain's deeper, maybe even evolutionary wisdom? Something to ponder.